Hi everyone, I'm here with Virginia Hendrickson, and she is a new mom to little baby Duke here, who is 3 months old. And she's going to talk to us today about delivery and breastfeeding and postpartum care and her experience delivering a baby outside of Seattle, Washington. So without further ado, how are you, Jenny?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm great. So tell us a little bit about, hi Duke, tell us a little bit about your delivery and how did labor go?
Our delivery was a little unconventional. It went by really fast in some aspects of it. And the other aspect of it, he came 2 weeks early, so at 38 weeks and 1 day. And around 35-ish weeks, I started having some false contractions. And the first day, they started about 8 minutes apart all day long. And then as the weeks progressed, they started going from 8 minutes to 5 minutes to 2 minutes, 24/7. And so my body was working around the clock to have him to come. And they're a little bit different than Braxton Hicks. They have a little bit more oomph behind them, and they tend to do a little bit of work for you. So as our prenatal appointments went on during the weeks, prior to his birth, I went from 2 centimeters dilated to 4, and then right before his due, I was about 5 or more centimeters dilated. And that was the week of Thanksgiving. And so our OB said, okay, do you want to have the baby in the hospital and have your turkey dinner there? Or would you like to have your turkey dinner at home? And we said, oh, we'd like to have turkey dinner at home. And so she goes, okay, I'm not going to really check you that much today. Well, of course, the next day, I thought everything was normal as usual. And we had hired a doula. And the doula was wonderful during those weeks of the contractions because I was able to ask her just different questions and not kind of rush to the hospital thinking that it was all happening. And so she gave me some tips and tricks to help handle them, but also give them the most work for their money, basically, which I think is probably why the delivery went so fast. Is because every single one of those contractions was doing all of this pre-work prior to the actual delivery time. So on the Tuesday before he was born at 11:45 p.m., the false contractions changed to actual contractions, and I suddenly realized that I actually had to breathe through them, which was a new process for me. And then by about 12:15, I could no longer walk or sit or talk through them. And we had been texting with our doula at that point, kind of giving her an update on the contraction and also my pain level. And she said, okay, I think we should start, making our way to the hospital and let's just see how we're doing. Yeah. So our doula we hired actually wasn't available at that time, but she was texting with us. So we had our backup doula, which was wonderful. She was just as great. And we decided at 1:15 that we would head to the hospital, and it's only about 7 minutes away, but it took me a good 15-20 minutes to put pants on and to put my sandals on, which is funny because they're just slip-ons. But you only have 1 minute between each contraction, and the first 30 seconds of every contraction just had me completely zoned out just trying to breathe through them. And then the other 30 seconds was like, okay, now I can breathe. All right, here we go. But that 1 minute was like, what do I do in 1 minute to get myself ready? And my husband, Joel, was awesome. He had all of our bags ready, and the car seat was already installed in the car. So we had the major things down. And then on our way to the hospital, a super normal thing that happens for women in labor is they have to throw up. And your body just wants to evacuate everything in preparation. And so at 1:45 in the morning, we're pulled over on the side of the road. And my poor husband just did not understand what was going on. He thought I was, pounding him on the chest because there was a traffic problem. But at 1:45 in the morning, there's no traffic. And so he finally realized what was going on and was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and pulled over for me.
Aww.
And then we got to the hospital at 2, and the hospital was great. We had called ahead to tell them we were on our way, and they had a nurse and a triage doctor available for us, and they hooked us up, and we're a little surprised that I was having intense contractions. I think probably because they have people come in all the time and are like, "Oh, my labor, it's happening," and they're like, "Okay, go home." And so they did a couple of contraction patterns for me, and they realized, "Oh, they're pretty intense. Let's check you to see how dilated you are." And at that point, I was 8.5 centimeters dilated, and they were a little shocked. And so they said, "Okay, let's get you to a room right now." And so they wheeled me over to a room as fast as they could. And I got there, and I was 9 centimeters and 3/4. But I wasn't fully dilated yet. I had a little bit of the crowning left, or I don't know what it's called, something. And my water hadn't broken yet, so we thought we might have a baby and call, which is in the sac completely. But then right before I was to start pushing, I had a contraction and my water broke, and it was like a water balloon breaking. It was really interesting. But right after that, they said, "Okay, let's start pushing." And we did about 4 pushes, and he came right out. And it was actually really awesome. One of the really amazing things about the process was the doula was there, and she was helping to coach me on how to push. So she would tell me to push low, and then as his head started to come, she would say, "Okay, I want you to push toward the ceiling now," or "I want you to push to the right or push to the left." Which, when you're not in the situation, that's a little hard to kind of comprehend. But if you can kind of like calm yourself during the pushing process and realize like, okay, if I push up, he's going to come out. And you're like, okay, I'm going to push up with all my might.
Yeah.
And that was really helpful to have her ability to know how to position the baby to get them out as fast as possible. Safely.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you had a really fantastic doula. What were some of the things she was telling you to do when you were having the prodromal labor, just prior to you really going into true labor? What were those helpful tips that she told you to do so that you would actually be using some of that pressure to help bring him down?
So every time I had a contraction, it felt like a bowling ball dropping into my pelvis. And she said to breathe down into it. So every time that bowling ball drops, you just want to breathe and try and open your pelvis up as much as possible. And then during those as well, to do lunges and squats. And in general, stay busy. This isn't the time to sit on the couch and do your Netflix, series binging or anything like that.
Right.
And so I think that just helped to keep everything moving and flexible.
Yeah.
So those were her main things during that time. Stay busy, breathe down into them, squat, lunge, which doesn't sound very comfortable when you're, 38 weeks pregnant.
Yeah, it probably isn't very comfortable when you're 38 weeks pregnant and contracting, but
yeah.
You said earlier that how did the feeling of the contraction, you said that it felt very powerful, and you compared that to something.
I would say the Braxton Hicks. A moment.
All right, so we're back again. Baby Duke is resting now. So I had asked you if you could describe how did contractions feel, because you didn't have an epidural. So if you don't mind just describing what those contractions were like right when you were pushing.
I had someone advise me before I was even pregnant that labor can feel like holding back 1,000 horses.
Mm.
And I didn't quite understand what she was saying at that point because I was kind of thinking contractions, okay, they're going to hurt really bad. That's fine. But I didn't realize that contractions also meant that your whole body, like almost every fiber in it, wants to push. And when your nurses and your doctor tell you that you're not allowed to push, then your head starts going, well, what am I going to do? Because it's just a natural instinct. And at that point, it kind of clicked like, oh, I am holding back wild horses because my body's not completely ready yet to go into the pushing stage. And that was very hard for me. And I asked for an epidural at that point, which the nurse kind of laughed at me because she just looked at me and she goes, okay, so it's going to take about 30 minutes to order the epidural and then another 30 minutes to administer the epidural while you're going through contractions. And your baby's going to be here in 20 minutes. And I was like, oh, okay. So we're at the end of this now. Like, I don't have to do this for very much longer. And she goes, no. I was like, oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll figure out how to do it then.
Great. So that's good.
Like,
you just needed to hear that the end was coming, that you were close.
I don't know why in that moment I thought it could go on for hours like this. When they were very adamant about trying to get me to a room to deliver because they knew that it was coming fast. And I knew because he was like, we need to get to the hospital. But in that moment, I was like, no, this is going to go on for like 8 more hours. I really don't know if I can handle 8 hours of trying, to hold my body back from pushing. And which is funny because I went through the prenatal classes where it's like, okay, when you get to this stage between 8 and 10 centimeters, it's going to go by very fast and you can just get ready.
Yeah.
And I didn't remember that. So.
Well, I think a lot of the prenatal classes, they're going to kind of prepare you for a long labor. Because usually a first-time mom does take a while. It can take up to 24 hours. Some of your labor was what we call prodromal. So it was sort of not true labor, but you were having some contractions and it was like carrying on. And then you said you had that for a month or two?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay. But still, it was, you would have had the baby by then if it was true labor.
Right. Hopefully.
Right. But you did everything you were supposed to do while that was going on. So I think there's just a lot of preparation for it to take a while because most people see in the movies that you break your water and you have to rush to the hospital because you're about to have the baby at any moment. And so they think that something is going wrong if it takes a while. But some people do have really fast labors. It can be from start to finish less than an hour, but it's unusual for it to be your first time baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how was postpartum for you? And if you could elaborate on from the time you brought Duke home and maybe if you experienced any baby blues or anything like that. And then we'll talk about breastfeeding after.
Postpartum for me in the hospital, the moment he came out, my appetite resurfaced, my body temperature dropped back down to normal. I suddenly wanted to wear socks again, and I'm a socks person. And the whole entire pregnancy, I didn't want to wear socks.
Ah.
And so about maybe 30 minutes after he came out, a nurse asked me if I wanted to eat something. And I didn't really think about it until then. And all of a sudden I was like, yes, I do want to eat something. And so it just realized how much the baby actually does put a strain on your organs. Just the weight of it and the feeling of it. And then your hormones just kick in so fast. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of great to kind of feel like I was back to my normal self so soon afterwards. And then one tip a nurse gave me is that in the first maybe week or two that you have a newborn, every time you nurse them, go to the bathroom first. Because you want your bladder to be completely empty so that way your uterus can fully contract and that's how it's going to heal. And so that felt like such a big chore because I was like, well, if I'm in bed, I'll just feed him and then we'll just go back to sleep. And she's like, no, you need to do this. And I'm really glad she did, because I was able to heal a lot faster. And that makes everything better in life when you have a newborn. When we got back from the hospital, he decided like the first 2 nights that he wanted to cluster feed like every hour and a half, which means I was maybe getting about 40 minutes of sleep in between each feeding. And finally, on the second night of that, I woke my husband up and I said, I'm sorry, I can't do this. Can you please go get a pacifier? Which is a big no-no in the world of
Breastfeeding.
Pediatricians and breastfeeding and all of that. And I just was like, I'm sorry, I can't do this. And he took it right away, and he was totally fine breastfeeding. But that really saved me, because I was realizing when I was getting tired, my emotions were spiking really high. So that kind of happened maybe once or twice more in the coming weeks after that. One time I went to Target to buy Depends underwear, because you still leak a lot afterwards. And the Depends underwear wasn't on the shelf, and I had to ask like 3 different employees for it, and they put it over the loudspeaker.
Oh,
and I'm trying at this moment to realize like the funny situation in all of this, and not just start crying because I'm tired and I just want to go home and go to sleep. And I really just want my Depends underwear so I don't have to think about all these pads and mesh underwear and that kind of thing. And so I got home and I just started crying, and my husband goes, what is wrong? And I was like, nothing's really wrong. I really just want to sleep. And he was like, okay, let's put you to sleep. Okay, all right, I'll go to sleep. And so realizing that sleep was a huge trigger for me, we just kind of made it a priority. So we had a rule of no one to come over before 11 a.m. in the morning, because if the baby and I had had a rough night, I was able to get, another sleep cycle in between his feedings. And that was really helpful. Just understanding your own boundaries of what's good for you and for the baby, and just letting everyone else know, you know what, we're going to take care of ourselves first, and then you can come over and celebrate. Because we do love the celebrating part.
Yeah, that's a really, really good tip. And 11 a.m. is still early. I mean, most people don't want, family, I understand, but 9 a.m. is a little bit early for anybody. So, you're up all night with a brand new baby, and I know they're trying to be helpful, but you still feel a sense of, well, I need to be kind of awake, and I need to be kind of a host. It needs to be clean. Baby needs to be fed. That's a lot before 11 a.m. So that's a great tip. I also liked the tip in the beginning where you mentioned that, what was it? Now I just lost my train of thought.
Peeing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Where you mentioned just emptying your bladder so that you had more room for your uterus to contract down to normal size, which is called involution. But that is perfect. Perfect. All right.
I had never heard that before. Yeah. So it was great the nurse said it.
Yeah. So now that you're through like the initial couple of weeks, did you experience any postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety?
I didn't experience any anxiety with postpartum. There were a couple nights, about 2 or 3 weeks in, where I would probably say the novelty of waking up at 4 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., whatever it is, to feed a baby kind of wore off. And I remember one night I was, in our chair in the nursery nursing him, and I just thought to myself, this is never going to end. Like, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. I will never get a full night's sleep again, and I just need to, realize that. But in that moment, I was just so tired and, foggy brained that it was like, I'm never going to do this. And then 5 seconds later, I was like, no, wait a minute. He will sleep through the night at some point, and he will take a sippy cup because he'll be having normal food, and he won't, depend on you solely to get up and feed him. And he will walk at one point and be happy. Like, that is going to come, and this is just for a short period of time. And so it was nice that I was able to talk myself out of it about like 5 minutes after having that thought stream, because I can see how that would be a downward spiral where you just start thinking that and then it just is going to ruin the rest of your night and the subsequent day too.
Right. If you let overwhelm kind of take over,
Yeah.
feeling short-sighted. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
So you've been breastfeeding amazingly from, I think, day one. Can you just tell us a little bit about how that's been? I hear that he is sort of on a good schedule right now, so that's amazing. How did you do it?
Breastfeeding from the start was a little bit difficult for us. The very first time he tried to latch on, he was tucking his top lip like that. And so the latch wasn't great at all. And my nipples were starting to get really sore from it. So even in the first feeding, one of our great nurses at our hospital, who I think they're all lactation nurses as well, she said, you know what, let's stop before this gets any worse, before you get frustrated and you're sore and hurt, and before he gets frustrated, and let's use a nipple shield. And so we started with that. And by the time we left the hospital, we were off of the nipple shield. And then I got engorged. And so that wasn't helping him latch on at all. And I went to my postpartum appointment and she gave me some tips on what to do. And one of them was hot compresses that you just kind of gently put around your breast and then massage. And that will help to move the milk out. Another thing she said is that if you feel yourself getting engorged, use your breast pump for only 2 to 3 minutes. It's just enough to get your breast to let down, to get the milk out, and then you can put your baby on your breast, and that will help the milk to flow. And so those kind of tips helped, but it was definitely tough at first and hurt a lot. And we used the cooling nipple pads, which were amazing, that you keep in the fridge. Those were a lifesaver. So he was back on the nipple shield for about 2 weeks after that. And then my hospital in the area has a breastfeeding class where there's a lactation consultant there who will help you transfer from a nipple shield, or if you're dealing with any sort of problem with breastfeeding, they help you with it. And it's nice because you're around other mothers, and while it is new for you to have your breast out at any given moment, seeing other mothers in the same situation and being able to talk and relax during the process is really important for breastfeeding. And she was able to help us transition off of it, and we've been off ever since. And then the way that we kind of got on a schedule is I think he did it himself. Kind of right as we got from the hospital, he would go about every 4 hours, and that was during the day and at night. And then he slowly started adding more time between feedings at night. So he would go 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours. And those moments that I got, those 7-hour stretches, were like gold. I would wake up and see what time it was, and I was like, oh my gosh, I instantly felt better. Waking up, I was horrible. But having that 7 hours, the first one, the 7-hour stretch was awesome. So he just started doing that more and more. And I realized that the more 7-hour stretches were because he would feed closer before he went to bed. So then what I tried to do, just to facilitate it, just little experiments, is see if I fed him, about an hour and a half before I wanted him to go down, and then I would feed him right before he went down, and that helped increase his times to be able to sleep longer. And now we're at the point where I switched him from a 4-hour schedule to a 3-hour schedule, because he sleeps about 10 hours at night, maybe sometimes 11, and I wasn't able to get him 5 feedings a day. And he is a really long baby, but he doesn't have very much fat on him. We're working on it. We're getting there. But he's about 100 percentile in height, and he was 20% in weight when he was born. And now we're up to 50% in weight. And so we're trying to pack on those pounds for him. So I don't want him to lose any of those feedings during the day. So I switched him to a 3-hour schedule. So we still get the 5 feedings, but he goes down maybe between 8 and 9:30 and wakes up between 7:30 and 8 o'clock. And that works for him.
Right. Not for every baby. So you're doing, you said 5 feedings through the day, not the 8 feedings, which is sort of like what you hear is, okay, that's good.
He just wants to sleep. And so the advice I was given is that if your baby's sleeping, just let him sleep. When he's hungry, he'll wake up and he'll feed. And, sleep is really important for growth as well. And so that's just kind of how we started it.
I think that's great. That's good. Plus, he was sort of a lean baby. So now that he's up to the 50% mark in his weight, he's gaining a ton of weight. I mean, he's doubled, I think, his pounds, right? Or nearly.
Correct.
So that he's getting the adequate nutrition that he needs at this point. And the pediatrician's reassuring you that too.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
We have a count on his wet diapers a day, and he gains about 3/4 pound a week. And so he's up in his weight. He's, I think, about 16 pounds now at 3 months old. So we got a big baby. No surprise, though, because my husband's 6'6", and he was also a very long, lean baby when he was born. And so he's just following in his dad's footsteps.
Perfect. Okay, so you mentioned a couple of different things that you like to use. So the compress, the cold compress, and things like that. So I'm going to list that in the bottom of this. You'll have an article attached to this video. But is there anything else that you might recommend? Is there certain swaddles you like to use, or baby wearing? Any name brands that you'd like? Anything. If it's working for you, we want to hear about it.
One thing that's related to breastfeeding that really helps is the breastfeeding bustier, which is like a tube top that has a zipper in the front, but it's able to do hands-free pumping. So then I'm able to just relax and realize that this is another part of motherhood and just pump any excess milk that I have. And the tip I was given that if you want to pump any breast milk, you do it after their longest feeding, because that's when you'll be most full. Because if you're not trying to store milk for if you're going to go back to work or you're going to have a surgery or something, you don't want to over increase your milk supply too much by over pumping, one day to get X amount of ounces. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of been my mantra, is I just pump after his night sleep, and I get a couple ounces and I store it and put it away. One thing that I wish I had gotten a lot earlier is a ring sling. And that's just a baby holder that I find really easy to put on and off, so it makes me want to use it more. We do have a clip carrier, and I've used it once, but I just felt like my clothes were riding up, and I don't know, I just didn't enjoy it as much. So the ring sling we use is called a Wild Bird, and it's a linen material, which is a little bit more breathable, but it also gives enough structure so that way you can tighten it and loosen it correctly without it giving too much. I think I've tried a couple of cotton ones or a little bit more spandex, and they seem to just slouch the baby around in different areas, so you can't secure them as much as you need to.
Okay.
And I like the way that the linen one looks.
Okay.
So it adds some style points with having to do baby wearing versus a clip contraction that goes all over.
Yeah, and those clip carriers are a little difficult to put on by yourself. Mm-hmm. So it's okay if, your husband is around and he can kind of get you harnessed in, but if it's just you out grocery shopping or something like that, it's going to be more difficult. So that makes sense. Okay. What about for baby Duke? Is there anything that you've noticed he really likes?
We use a product called Waxoline when he was right after when we did his first diaper when he was born. I was given this tip. Most hospitals use Vaseline. And we just wanted to use a little bit more of a natural product. And so we put the Waxoline on his bum. and you kind of just coat the whole thing so that way the first poop of the meconium doesn't stick to their skin because it is pretty gummy.
Yeah.
And so we did that for maybe like the first 2 weeks. But the waxling does have vitamin E oil in it. So the thing is we had him circumcised, and you shouldn't use vitamin E oil with a wound because they don't want it to adhere to old skin, the new cut to adhere. So we haven't been using it as much, but I think when we start doing solid foods again, we'll kind of need that to help with the acids that are going to form.
Definitely.
But the waxling's really nice.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The other product we were advised to use was vitamin D drops. We do live in the Seattle area, so we don't get as much sun as other places, and our vitamin D levels usually are lower. I do take a daily prenatal, even after birth. They say it's great for keeping your breast milk up, making sure that you're taking care of yourself still because your body's still healing, even 3 months out. And so we give him 1 drop of vitamin D every morning. And I think that also helps him because we are in flu season right now. And thankfully we haven't been getting very sick. So that's been really nice too.
Yeah.
One swaddle we really like is called a Woombi. And it's a zip swaddle, but it has a 2-way zipper. So that way, if you do have to get up with your baby in the middle of the night and change them, you just zip from the foot up to about halfway, and then you can change a diaper, but they're still pretty secure, so they don't wake up too much.
Ooh, I've never heard of that. That's cool. Which prenatal vitamin are you taking?
I'm taking one called Innate Response. I haven't been able to find it in a store yet, but I found it on Amazon, and a naturopath had recommended it to me. And I don't know if this is the reason why, but I didn't have very much morning sickness when I was pregnant. And they actually suggested that I take twice the amount that's suggested on the bottle because my body just wanted more vitamins. And I think that really helped with a lot of things. I don't know if that helps with not getting postpartum depression or not, but I think just having those stores of vitamins and not having my hormones go up and down and my body having to pull from my bones or different areas, I think that helps with a newborn baby. I don't know. That's just my theorizing over it.
It's definitely good to have those vitamins in your system because you are producing such highly nutrient and high density caloric breast milk that having adequate vitamins is really good because otherwise it's pulling from your bones the calcium that you would be needing for the breast milk. So you want to replace all that good stuff because you're really creating quite a liquid gold basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's good. Did you happen to do anything with your placenta? Did you do anything with that?
I didn't. I looked at it, but I didn't have it put into vitamin form or a milkshake or an omelet. And I didn't take any creative photos with it.
Okay.
But it was really fascinating to see it. And the doctor kind of explained to me which section I was looking at and how it was attached inside of my uterus and things. So I was fascinated by it. But I also kind of like blood. So
yeah, it looks like a big organ, kind of like your liver or something. I mean, it's pretty big. So, okay. I know up in that area, a lot of women in the Pacific Northwest in general, maybe also Colorado or something, a lot of women now are encapsulating their placenta. They're drying it out, and then they don't have to eat it as an actual food. They can just take it. And that's supposed to help with their hormone levels. So I'll probably do a little research and then dive deep into that topic because it is really interesting. And it's just starting to sort of, the whole encapsulation process is starting to take off. So it's new and kind of fun. Though people have been eating their placenta for, centuries. So
one thing I know, just because we had a baby in a hospital, is it's a little bit harder. You have to set it up ahead of time if you want to do encapsulation, and you have to sign lot of different waivers saying that you're taking an organ out of the hospital.
Mm.
So just if someone's going to do the encapsulation process, just realize that you may have to do more homework before you're actually in the delivery room.
Perfect. All right. So, could you tell us a little bit about what you might have packed in your delivery bag or what you brought to the hospital?
Sure. We were given the advice by a couple of new moms who delivered right before us not to bring a lot of clothes for mom or just things for mom in general. They usually provide everything there for you. The one thing we were told to bring was toiletries. So if you want to take a shower, brush your teeth, lotion, anything like that. Um, I also brought my pregnancy pillow, which is called a BB Hug Me. And it's just this long tube, and you can make it firmer or softer, and you can use it to rest on while laboring or after labor. You can use it in different ways. So I brought that there, and then we were told to bring a fan because the labor process can get really hot and sweaty, and a great way to relax is a fan. So we brought that with us. And our hospital informed us to bring another pillow for dad and a sleeping bag. Because while the mom is really hot during this whole process, usually the rooms are cooler. And the beds that they have for dad are usually against a window or maybe an outer wall, which can be a lot cooler. So we brought those items. Well, the fan we didn't use. And we did bring a modern version of a boombox, a jam box, and we didn't use that either. But the pregnancy pillow really helped for after postpartum. I was able to kind of lean on that to get off of my tailbone. My tailbone was sore, and it just felt good to rest on something, and I didn't have to feel like I had to hold my body up at all. One thing I was told, or I read actually in a blog, was about a special type of underwear called period underwear, and the brand is called Thinx. And it basically looks like normal underwear, but it has an extra absorbent layer in it that can catch everything that comes out. Now, I would say that right after delivery, it's not enough to catch, but depending on the person, maybe a week, 2 weeks after you deliver, it's just enough so that way you can go the whole day and you don't have to worry about changing out pads, and then you just wash them that night.
That's pretty
And those
incredible. That's cool.
Then you don't feel like you're wearing a diaper, or you can wear normal clothes and not feel like it's showing.
Yeah.
So that was really nice.
That's great. Does Duke like any specific thing for breastfeeding? I know he's starting to teeth. Does he have any favorite toys or goodies?
We use what is called a Wubbanub, which is the pacifier, and that's been one of his favorite things for a while now. And we're just getting to the point, he really loves black and white still. He kind of loved that right when he was born, but those are still some of his favorite things. There's a toy called a Winkle, I believe, which just looks like a mass of all these tubes together, and it has a little bit of a rattle in it. And we hang that on his Playmat mobile, and he loves playing with that. And his hands have been his favorite thing the past 2 days.
And those are free.
Yeah, those are free, and they're always around. I never know if I'm going to forget it. We have done the black and white contrast books a lot. We have ones that are animals, faces, just different shapes. And we use those during tummy time to help extend him in that, so that way he stays in it longer. And we place it around the mat on different areas, so that way we make sure his neck is getting strengthened in the same way on equal sides, instead of just the left being stronger than the right.
That's smart. That's really good. Most babies are only able to see some contrasting colors, so they really can only see black and white. So that makes a lot of sense that he's drawn to black and white images.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So how has teething been? You said it just started? like 2 days ago?
It started about 2 days ago. Usually one of his feeding signs is he kind of does the tongue roll like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been seeing him doing it maybe right after we feed, maybe an hour after we feed. And he's usually pretty consistent with this 3-hour schedule now. But now I'm realizing he's doing the tongue roll, but then licking his gums. And so it's a lot more drool. But so far, he's been okay with it. We haven't gotten to any fussy stage. And I think he's just really loving his hands. He found his hands, and now he's like, whoa, they task great. And they're always there.
Do you think you'll do anything like frozen breast milk or anything like that?
I do have something that are little baby fruit popsicle holders. And they're different than a normal popsicle holder because they have a smaller handle and more like a ring. And then the popsicle part of it is smaller as well and shaped a little bit more round. I haven't done those yet. I need to remember when I have my excess pumping milk in the morning to fill the mold with them. But I want to have those on hand for any of those first moments of kind of discomfort for him.
Yeah.
And then that way you're giving him breast milk and you're not actually giving him anything else that he's not supposed to have.
Right. That's great. That's a really good item. How has the postpartum recovery recuperation been for you? Are you doing anything like mommy exercise group, or are you getting into that part yet?
At 6 weeks after I got the clear from my doctor, I did have stitches. I tore just a tiny little bit. And for some reason, my stitches weren't coming out. And so they just had to remove them at the appointment. So she's like, okay, now you're all clear to do whatever you want to do. And so I did a bar class, which is kind of like a ballet, I don't know, immersion of some sort. And during the class, I was like, oh, I got this. Are you kidding me? I just went through labor. I need to hold this for a minute. I can totally do that. And then the second class I did maybe about 3 days later, I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. It's too much work. And you really don't have abs. I didn't have abs. And so that was just being aware of, where you are in the process. And it is going to be a long process of knitting your muscles back together and being able to use ones that you haven't used for 9 months. But that was just a really funny realization. The first class, I was like, yeah, I'm golden. I'm so on top of this. One thing I have realized for myself is if I'm laying down and I want to roll over, there are definitely muscles in my lower abdomen and between my legs that just twinge. And it's like, oh, that was a baby pushing muscle that I never used before. Now it's telling me it's still there. Okay. So just taking it slower and realizing even now when I feel fine that my body's still, processing and trying to get things back together. I have tried to do more walking and that's going okay. I'm not pushing myself too hard.
Good.
I'm trying just to do things that feel natural, and I should get myself on a routine soon, but we'll see.
I think you're doing great. So you mentioned bar, and I think you told me that you did bar prior to delivery. Did that help you in any way? Was it using, certain muscles, or I guess it's a lot of squats, but did that help you for delivery?
I think it did. I think one thing that they do in bar classes is they have you tuck your hips under a lot. And I did a little bit of research, maybe right as I was pregnant, and saw that tucking of the hips helps to align the baby for delivery a lot more. So I tried to keep on doing that during my pregnancy. I wasn't able to go to as many bar classes just because I didn't feel like it, or it hurt, or I was exhausted, all of the above. But I did try and tuck my hips a lot. And so that way my lower lumbar wasn't going out of whack. And that helped, I think, a lot in positioning him. Another thing that I did, this is kind of years ago, is I had pelvic therapy. And so they taught me how to use each muscle down there. And so I was able to, when the doula was telling me, I want you to push up, I kind of understood what up was and which muscle I needed to use. And that was extremely helpful. So even though if you don't have any problems in that region, a pelvic therapist can help in preparation, I think, in that way. And then afterwards too. I think most women don't realize that you shouldn't have pain after you have had a baby. And you can go and help readjust those muscles, because most of the time they've gotten out of whack because you pushed a baby out.
Yeah, definitely. I will frequently refer women. If it's something that I can't help them with, then I'll refer them to a pelvic floor therapist, because they're really the pros in the whole pelvic region. So a regular physical therapist won't be able to help as much as a pelvic floor therapist for women in this region. So that's great.
Yeah.
How has your family helped you? I know that you're a stay-at-home mom, but has there been any, how are you cleaning the house? And how's your husband sort of, like, what is his role? How has he been helping you?
My family and my husband's family has been great. They live about 10 or 20 minutes away. So they're directly in our region. And most of the time they'll be driving by, hey, can we stop by and see Duke? Which is kind of sweet. And they'll just pop by for 30, 40 minutes and play with him and then, kind of go on their way, which is great that they get to do that as grandparents now. My family and Joel's family is wonderful, where if we say, hey, maybe not today, they really understand that, and they don't try and put any guilt or shame on that. My sister-in-law came over about 2 days after he was born, and I told her, I was like, oh, I think I'm going to call my mom and see if she can come over and clean the bathroom for me. I don't feel like it's very clean. And she goes, oh, I'll do it for you. And she's like, where are your gloves? And so she grabbed my gloves and the cleaning supplies, and she scrubbed the bathroom down, and it was amazing. I walked in there, and that just felt wonderful to have that done for me. And I know not all sister-in-laws are like that, but I'm very thankful that I have one who was willing to do that. Otherwise, we had something called a meal train, where friends and family could sign up to bring us meals on specific days. And that was a complete and total blessing. I did not have to cook maybe but once for 2.5 months, which is really hard after 2.5 months to go, oh, I do need to go grocery shopping. And how do you cook a meal with a newborn who maybe needs to feed right in the middle of a cooking session? And so kind of understanding maybe I should start cooking earlier during the day, or realize our dinner is going to be later than we usually have. And for sure, takeout is always a great option too.
Definitely. So you're not pumping all that much, from what I gather. You just pump in the morning after you've gone all night. You're probably a little bit full. So you pump a little bit in the morning. Is that after you feed him?
Correct.
Okay.
So we do a full feeding in the morning, and then he goes back down for another, nap for whatever length it is. And so during that time, I pump the excess out. And I try not to pump myself dry, because I don't want to stimulate my body doing too much more production. But it's just enough to relieve it, because if I don't, I feel it the rest of the day. And that's a little uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
And I do like having the extra milk in the freezer. If for some reason we have to stop pumping earlier than I would like, or he can just have that, when he's 1 or 2 in his oatmeal or in a sippy cup or something.
Okay, that's great. I think it's good for peace of mind. It's definitely good too, if you're trying to increase your milk supply, to drain after a breastfeed. So pumping after every breastfeed for people that are trying to increase their milk supply, because you really want to, one, empty the breast completely so that your body will regenerate, a complete store of milk every 3 hours or so. But I think some people like to see it, in bottle form. They like to know that they have plenty even after the baby is satisfied. I think they love knowing that there's some in the freezer just in case. It's kind of a security blanket.
Oh, completely. And that's originally why I started it. Is a friend of mine who had a baby a week after ours. She had to have a little surgery done where she couldn't breastfeed for 24 hours. And so she had to stock up milk in order to go for that 24-hour period. And so that kind of got me thinking like, oh, yeah, you do plan on breastfeeding solely, but what if there's an instance where you can't and you don't want to, deprive him of breast milk, and also during that time have your breast milk supply stop, so you have to pump and dump all of it. And so that was a really kind of a good lesson for me that I didn't even think about before. But it is kind of satisfying when you're like, oh yeah, I got 5 ounces today after a full feeding. I'm pretty awesome today.
Yeah,
So that's great.
that is great. Are you using any specific breast pads or like milk pads to kind of absorb? Do you do anything? What are you wearing? Like, what's that should be the first question. What are you drinking and what are you wearing? So, like, what kind of nursing bra have you found to be helpful? And like those pads are using disposable.
Someone had given me a tip. I think it was the doula before going into the hospital to have a front clip bra for while you're laboring. So that way, right when the baby comes out, you can unclip from the front and you can do skin to skin right away. Because the reasoning behind that is sometimes people have to have IV lines for an epidural or just because you have an IV line, and it's really hard to take a bra off over a line. Mm-hmm. And so that was one tip. We didn't end up using it because I brought it, but it just didn't end up using it. After that, the first probably couple weeks, I used these really soft elastic bras that are nursing ones, and they were great for being engorged and just, it was support, but just soft and comfortable. And I still wear those at night because I do get very full over the course of about 10 hours. And then during the day, I use Natori nursing bras. And I like the Natori ones because it's a full cup that's formed. So you're not going to have any nipple show through or awkward shape. But they're still soft enough that it's comfortable on your skin. You can bend the cup down to be able to breastfeed with them. Some of the other brands that I tried just were really rough and stiff and awkward to try and, breastfeed even out in public. You're trying to do it as indiscreetly as possible or discreetly as possible. Yes. And that was a little awkward.
Yeah.
The breast pads that I use are a bamboo cotton that have a waterproof backing, and they are very absorbent. And I use those at night. Every night.
Are they bamboobies?
They're not the bamboobies. I've tried the bamboobies. The bamboobies I find not to be quite as absorbent. So maybe if you're going for a shorter period of time, they'd be better. I don't fill up a whole breast pad every night. Some days I do, some days I don't. But I find that the bamboobies just aren't as great. Okay. And the shape of them is very cute. It's a heart. But I find that awkward underneath the pad because, I don't know.
It's like not totally covering everything.
Yeah, and your breasts and your body shift at night or during the day. And so you could have it place centered, and then it could move into the crux of the heart shape, and then you're not actually getting coverage, and you could, leak out. I do know a lot of people love the bamboobies. I just am not one of them.
That's okay.
So, yeah, that's why there's so many different products.
That's right. So you'll just have to send me all the products that you really want. I'm going to include them in an article right below this video so that you can look at everything. And so That's about it. Thank you so much for sitting here and with Duke, who's been so good through all of this, and just talking with me.
No problem. My pleasure.
All right. Thanks, Ginny.
Bye-bye.
Bye.